All right, I've got the intake plenum off this 3.6 liter V6. It's called a high feature V6. It's got dual overhead cams with 3 timing chains, 1 primary and 2 secondary. So the issue with this engine is that it won't stay running long. It runs for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and if it running, I wouldn't even call it running. It's very weak, doesn't have any power, doesn't respond to throttle, shuts off 2 or 3 seconds later. It came on gradually according to the driver. It didn't happen all of a sudden, so something changed slightly or gradually over a week or two, a period of time. When I went to pick it up to see what was wrong with it, I drove it about half a mile before it died on me completely, and then it hasn't run since. So something's kind of funky going on with this engine. So what I was going to do, I changed the timing chains on this engine 3 years ago, and a little bit of research on the internet says that I need to do it again. I think that's ridiculous to have to change timing chains every 3 years. I doubt it's got 40,000 miles on it since the last time. But so I'm at the stage now where I'm almost, I could redo the timing chains. I've got basically this side of the engine stripped down. All this stuff that was most of this is electrical. It's gone out of the way. Engine mount's gone. Next step would be to take this thermostat housing off, the thermostat hose, get the power steering tank out of the way, unhook this, lift this tube out of the way, and just put a rag in it. That's transmission, not transmission, that's power steering fluid. And get this, I can take this tank and just kind of push it out of the way, not really take it off the engine. I mean, out of the car. So basically I'm just trying to clear out this area for doing the timing chains. However, I got to thinking, I tried to, so the things I've done so far, I've replaced the crankshaft position sensor, all 4 cam sensors. That didn't fix it, and it's kind of strange because I can't think of anything else that would cause a no start like this, unless it's, and so then last night I connected a coil and I took this, by the way, I took this paper in here to keep dirt from falling in the intake manifold. You want to do that. I've seen a lot of videos where they don't do that, and you're going to be sorry if you drop a bolt because you won't get it out. You drop a bolt or screw or anything else that goes down those holes. If the valve is open, it's going into the cylinder, and this engine's got to come out and be taken apart to get it out. So it's very, very wise to put something blocking these holes. But anyway, last night I had the idea, well, if it wouldn't start, did it have spark? So I hooked up an ignition coil. That's one of the downsides of these type engines, these direct or coil on plug ignitions. This is the ignition coil, and this here sitting here, the plug is down in the hole. There's no spark plug wire, so you can't pull a spark plug wire off a plug and do testing for sparks. So, but last night I had the idea, so I took this plug, this ignition coil, I took one of, well, I already had some out, but I took it and plugged it up here on this wire here, and it doesn't matter which coil you plug out here, they're not indexed or anything. So put a coil here and a spark plug in, touch the spark plug to the ground, remove these papers, turn the engine over, and yes, I did have spark. So before I took this all apart, I sprayed raw gasoline into the throttle body trying to see if it fired without the engine putting the fuel to it, and it wouldn't even fire the end. So why? That doesn't make any sense that it would not at least fire on sprayed gasoline if it had spark. So now they know it's got spark. Also yesterday, one of the reasons I took this intake manifold off was you can't get to any of these spark plugs with the intake manifold on, and it's not that hard to get off. It took about 20 minutes. With the intake manifold off, I did a compression check, and I had 120 psi in this cylinder here and 120 psi in the back cylinder, a little bit more than 120 in the back middle cylinder back there. So I did some research. 120 is not terrible. It's not it's on the low end, but it's not low enough that it wouldn't fire. So that rules out the compression problem. So what is the problem? So in brainstorming, trying to figure what to do, came up with the idea of putting a spark plug back on here, pulling this coil out, put a compression tester in here, put a spark plug on here. This is the wire that goes to that plug. Put a spark plug test, ignition coil here so I can get a spark. Put my compression tester in here, and then on my compression tester, take out the one-way valve, the check valve, so that a compression tester works by every time it gets a shot of air, the air gets trapped in there and it keeps building and building, and you get the peak reading. But if you take the one-way valve out, the needle will drop back to 0 every time the piston goes back down. So you'll get like a pulse. You'll get a needle that rises to the top when the piston's at the top and then drops back down. So essentially the compression tester will become a top dead center indicator. So if I can turn the engine over with the needle going up and down, tell me where top dead center is, and then observe the sparks and see if they're occurring at the same time, then I'll know that the engine's timed, or at least the spark is reasonably timed with the TDC of the engine. If it's not, then that tells me that there's a reluctor wheel on the engine that's down way inside the engine. The crankshaft position sensor's in the back. And that crankshaft position sensor, which bolts into the back, is reading that reluctor wheel on the crankshaft. Those reluctor wheels are held on by basically an interference fit. They are heated up and then pushed onto the crankshaft when they're hot, and then when they shrink, they grip just by the fact that the hole is smaller than the journal that they're going on. So it's basically a friction fit, interference fit. But they have been known to slip. If the interference fit is not machined properly, your tolerances aren't right, those wheels have been known to, especially in an oil environment, they've been known to shift a little bit. So if the reluctor wheel, that kind of makes sense because this thing didn't die suddenly, it died over a period of time, a period of a week or so. That would explain, the reluctor wheel would explain that, because it's gradually shifting in position until it finally shifted to a point where the engine wouldn't run. At least that's my theory. So I'm going to test, I'm going to do a spark test and see if it corresponds with top dead center on this cylinder here. And if that's not conclusive, I can do some more research and find out what. So the reluctor wheel is 60 teeth minus 2. It's called 60 minus 2. It's actually 58 teeth, but it would have had 60 if there's not a gap. So there's a 2-tooth gap in the wheel, and I need to find out when the crankshaft position sensor is at the gap, or just starting to see the gap, at what point is the crankshaft, what cylinders on TDC when that happens. And then I can position the engine on TDC using my, like I say, using the compression tester, because engines like this, the problem with engines like this, they don't have timing marks. You have a flywheel down here, or not a flywheel, a harmonic bouncer with no timing marks, because you never can adjust the timing. You're not supposed to have to do it anyway. So if I can't check timing or check TDC down there, the only other way to check TDC is by putting a long screwdriver or something down in the spark plug hole and watching the screwdriver rise and fall as the piston moves up and down, and you can find TDC of that cylinder. So if I know the firing order and TDC of a cylinder, I'll know about where I'm at, and I can know where that reluctor should be. So I found out through another video, if you watch one of my videos on YouTube, the reluctor gap is usually 90 degrees from the lead-off cylinder in the firing order. So if cylinder number 1 is your first cylinder in your firing order, which it usually is, that makes sense. One is your first cylinder. The last cylinder in the firing order is where the gaps in the reluctor wheel are pointing at the crankshaft position sensor, because you get a 90-degree lead off to the number 1 cylinder. So it's a long story I just spoke, but I'm gonna go ahead and do some tests and see if I can continue to narrow down what might be wrong with this engine. Okay, this is a quick update on this 3.6 liter high feature V6. So what I was trying to figure out is, I had a hunch that the trigger wheel had slipped and it was causing the timing to be off. But I took the crankshaft position sensor out, stuck a screwdriver in there, and rotated the engine by wedging it against the block and on the teeth of the trigger wheel, and it moved the engine. So it doesn't seem like the trigger wheel slipped. So the problem I've got to find is I got to find when TDC occurs and when the spark occurs, and see if they occur pretty much the same time. In other words, when the piston's coming up to fire, the spark should happen right around TDC. So I had an idea. If I take a compression gauge like this and take the one-way check valve out of the end of it, so that when the compression hits it, the needle goes up to 120 and immediately drops back down to 0 when the piston goes back the other direction. This gauge becomes a top dead center indicator. So it tells when it hits that peak of 120, the piston's at the top, and then it goes back down. So what I was looking for was this needle swinging up to 120 as the engine turned, and then I was watching a spark happen down here on the spark plug. I've got a coil right here with a spark plug attached to it. Same plug that came out of this hole where the compression tester's at. And I was watching the spark and watching the needle at the same time, and it's very strange. It kind of helps me understand what's going on. So when I first did it, they were out of phase. The spark would occur when the needle wasn't jumping, and then when the needle jumped up to 120, it was no spark. It's like they're 180 degrees out. Well, then after I did it the second time, then the spark started occurring at the same time as the needle. So it got back in time. I did it a third time, and it went back out of time again. The spark was occurring 180 degrees out of or 360 degrees out of the peak of the needle. So what that indicates to me is that the computer doesn't know when the engine is on top dead center on the compression stroke. It's getting lost as to when that happens. The only explanation for that is something going on with the timing chains on the camshaft, because it's not getting the proper signal from the camshaft when TDC occurs. So the bottom line is that the timing chains on this engine are bad and got to be done again, which is what I suspected. I just wanted to verify it before I did all that work. So in hindsight, I'll use the Chloe's timing gear set, but every box said made in China. I won't be using the Chloe set again. This time I'll use genuine General Motors or some other OEM or some other brand other than made in China. And also I'll check the condition of the chains and the guides and everything to make sure that they're not worn out and they're getting proper lubrication. So again, 3 years later, I got to do the timing chains on this engine again. This thing is a major pain in the butt. Thanks for watching.